Thanksgiving dinner came like a big show, complete with a chorus of forced thanks and tired platitudes about thanks. But this year, the fake smiles around the mahogany table looked like the fake turkey decoration I sat next to. 2 seats from the front in the seat meant for the host's partner. I could feel the mashed potatoes on my fork. Delilah's cranberry sauce sparkled in the chandelier light, and I watched her eat. Even though I hadn't eaten in minutes, lift her wine glass in that practice move she always did when she had something important to say. That poised tilt of her head, that soft curve of her lips, and the way she stopped just long enough to she looked around the room to make sure everyone was looking at her before she spoke. "We voted," she said, her voice steady and her eyes wide. I thought I was part of a family when I saw their faces. The word hit me like a hammer in the chest. Around me, forks hit plates, people moved around in their places, and I could feel every heartbeat in the room, in sync with mine. I kept my eyes on Delilah because I didn't want her to be happy when she saw me. Flinch, my 19-year-old daughter Harper, who was tough and someone I had seen grow from a fat kid ass. A child grabbed my finger. A poised young woman, who was about to become an adult, got up from her chair and started to clap. The sound rang loud and threatening in my ears. And I knew right then that she wasn't loyal to me, but to the Harper's slow, deliberate clapping felt like salt being rubbed into an old wound. As she leaned in, she reached out and gave me a clean envelope. On the front, my name was written in Delilah's beautiful writing, and my heart skipped a beat. Not because of race. Anger didn't rise. I was ready for this. I took the envelope. With calm precision, I slid it into the pocket of my jacket while I folded my napkin and set it down next to my plate. Blinked once, a glint of victory dancing in her eyes. Sure, she'd shocked me. Instead, I reached out and touched her. I reached under the table and pulled out a thin folder bound in dark leather. I carefully placed it in front of her, but my gentle touch belied it, a storm that had been building up inside me for years. "Then, you won't need this," I told Maya, voice so low that only she could hear it, but it cut through the stress like a blade through silk. Guests leaned in to see how I responded to the insult they had seen. Delilah's normally confident smile broke. Saw her fingers shaking. Inside, page after page, as she lifted the folders, flap. Page of carefully arranged papers was waiting for them. The bank account showed every year I had canceled checks for the boutique transfer I'd made to cover Harper's dorm room and supplies, paying for Alex's lawyer fees and bills for Marjorie's surgery, and each sheet was marked up and put in a notebook of my loyalty and her betrayal. As she turned the first few pages, her perfect posture fell apart and she lost her cool. As the lips parted in a silent gasp that turned into an out-of-control scream, the room exploded in chaos. Forks scraped against each other, voices rang out in fear, and people strained to see what was making Delilah so crazy. I stayed seated though, still determined. I saw her break down in tears as Alicia Delalister ran to grab the folder, but she stopped in the middle of her reach when she saw a certain page. The words between Delilah and Alex, written email threads, show that they planned to quietly fire me after the holidays. Alec had written, "We'll handle the divorce papers." They were cold. He was too slow to see it coming. We took a screenshot that looked like proof of a plot, and I put it right. In the middle of the page, the only sounds in that tense silence were Delilah's sobs and the floorboards creaking. That's when I understood how hollow this was. Gathering had been going on for months, with their whispered talks behind closed doors and their dismissive looks when I walked in. When they walked into a room, Harper's sudden shortening of Dad to Marcus had weakened the base I was standing on. Even though I knew that the only family I had was gone, I didn't feel any different. Would build a new one. I shut the folder and slid it off the edge of the table, where it landed with a soft thud that sounded louder than a scream woke me up. I fixed my jacket and looked around at people whose faces were twisted. I walked to the door, ashamed, shocked, or glad that it was over, quietly as I walked into the act, leaving behind the broken pieces of a family that had chosen betrayal over love, thankfulness. I didn't look back. The last course had been served, and with it came the freedom of knowing I would never again eat lies or hold back fake love. As I walked into the cold light of the hallway, I faced the truth I had always known, but never had the courage to fully admit, that I was no longer forced to do what they said. I was free, and that freedom tasted the best of all tastes. It began in the smallest, silent ways, not with a slap or a door hit me in the face, but there was a cold, creeping quiet that filled the There Were Warm Places where Delilah used to be 6 months before that dinner. I could feel the change. It was the same every time. I'd walk in through the front door with my keys jangling. Instead of saying, "Hey babe, didn't hear you," Delilah would be upstairs with her headphones on, and her face lit up by her laptop. She'd say in her head, when I walked through the opening, I could tell she had turned her voice down to be more serious. "Marcus, could you move your— Mark, did you pay the TV bill?" I used to keep my name a secret, now sounded like a password, which she didn't want to use. The talks turned into quick deals, a list, and then there was no more eye contact at all. It was like I had slowly become like a piece of furniture in my own home. I thought it was worry. Maybe the shop wasn't doing well, or maybe she was just tired. We all go going through slumps, but Harper changed. And that's when I really felt the ground shift. My daughter, my joy, the child I had to coach through failed science fairs, broken hearts, and her first finder-binder stopped calling me Dad, and just called me Marcus. At first, I laughed it off. I asked her one night while we were sitting at the dinner table and she was looking through her phone and poking fun at me. Just getting used to calling people by their real names, she said with a shrug. I laughed again, this time in a softer, hollower way. That's why I asked. But she didn't answer. Delilah also didn't say anything. She just sat there. Harper's professor of political science was doing, she asked. She cleared her throat and changed the topic. A dinner guest at my own table who had stayed too long, but hadn't been asked to leave was around. Then I began to hear Delilah and her sisters talking quietly to each other at family gatherings. When we get together, they look at me and then lean closer, like girls in school passing notes about the weird kid in class. My name would be called out for a split second, and then the room would go quiet again. I would walk into the kitchen. I wasn't crazy. I did see Alec, Delilah's brother, nudging Delilah and cutting him off in the middle of something he was going to say. If you were paying attention, there was the change in seats for Thanksgiving dinner, the Carrington lunch, and even her niece. My seat was always farther away from Harper than from Delilah. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. But coincidences don't move a husband from the head table to the kids' table. Table 3 times in a row. The last straw wasn't a fight. It was a text message. You shouldn't have seen me go into the office to print a ticket for Harper's textbooks that I was still paying for. I didn't think about it. But when Delilah's laptop beeped, I looked at it. I thought the message might be a warning or an update on the boutique, but it came from Alec, and the subject line made my stomach knot. I couldn't breathe as I looked at the message. Get rid of him after the holidays. Don't worry, he's too slow to see it coming. It wasn't hazy or figurative. It was planned and strategic, and I was the mark. I watched the mouse move over the screen for a full minute while I thought about what to do. I was about to yell at them to print the damn thing and put it on the fridge, but something told me not to. I felt like I heard an old whisper that I hadn't heard in years. I took a picture of it instead of sending it to my personal email, and that's when things changed. I began writing down everything, not because I was looking for, I finally saw I was in one of the fights, but because I was in one of the receipts I'd once saved just out of habit. Every thank you I never got turned into proof. Every family favor I did, every bill I paid turned into a reason every night. While Delilah was networking, I stayed up to help Harper finish a project. Everything fit together like a puzzle. The pieces were coming together to make a picture I didn't want to believe was real. They weren't just pulling away. They were planning and leave a coordinated one. I quit wanting love and trying to fix things. What? They were already pulling apart, and I didn't tell anyone, not even Jalen at first. I needed time and clarity. I had to be careful not to walk into a fight with a butter knife. Delilah became colder and more polished, like she was. Harper played her mother's lack of interest in life so well that it scared me to stay awake at night and stare at us. I looked up at the ceiling and heard Delilah's phone buzzing softly across the room. I didn't ask her who she was texting. I knew they thought I was too blind to see the exit signs, too loyal, or too slow, so I didn't check again. But they forgot. Something I didn't grow up with was money. What I did grow up with was memory, survival, skills, and the ability to adapt, document, and survive. I've been taught to do this since I was a child, so I did it. I stopped waiting.